Welcome back to the Best Facts Apologetics Answers show. I'm here again in the studio interviewing Dr. Lydia McGrew. We've gone through some very important questions. Get all those at the Great Commission Alliance YouTube channel. Now I'm jumping right into one that is a little bit of a hot topic. And so before I go any further, I just want to preface with this. It's good for Christian scholars to work through difficult topics in a mutually respectful way to help sharpen our arguments for a world that needs our Savior. And so in this one, there have been some different sides and different people have set up on one side versus the other. And I just want to start by saying I am really thankful for both sides. And I'm thankful that they are working on these different things and sharpening each other. And I get to sit on the sidelines and see the fruit of their labor. So it's helpful to me. That being said, Dr. McGrew talks about fictionalizing literary devices in her book, The Mirror and the Mask. And she's referring to this idea that gospel writers used certain ideas or concepts that were fiction to convey a spiritual reality of some sort that they believed. They kind of put their assumptions onto Christ. And she talks about how that's not what's happening, and that's not what we should believe about the Gospels. Dr. McGrew, did I summarize that correctly as far as your usage of that term?
Yeah, so that's a term that I've coined, fictionalizing literary devices, for an idea that I disagree with, that I'm criticizing in The Mirror of the Mask. And I want to mention The Mirror of the Mask is available, and so is Hidden in Plain View in Kindle. So if viewers prefer Kindle, and then it's searchable, and that's good too, although they all have indexes if you get the paper copy as well. So this is an idea that I'm critiquing in The Mirror or the Mask. And it has, I like to say that it has four components. This idea that I disagree with, that some scholars, such as Dr. Michael Licona, has especially popularized, although he doesn't use this terminology. And here are the four components to what I call a fictionalizing literary device. First, that there's a factual change that the author has made. So an example I use, because it's easy for people to understand, is the claim, which I disagree with, that John moved the temple cleansing to a different time in Jesus' ministry, like it really happened according, so goes the claim, at the end of his ministry, but John makes it happen in his gospel at the beginning. So he's actually changing the time in the story of his gospel. And I believe, as I mentioned in one of our earlier segments, that it was twice that Jesus cleansed the temple twice, so John did not move it. But the claim is that he moved it. So that would be a factual change, that he actually changes. He makes it happen early, but it really happened late. The second aspect is that it's deliberate. So it's not just a slip that the author makes, but the author knows, this isn't really how it happened, but this is how I'm going to make it happen in my gospel. The third aspect is that it's invisible. So the author doesn't pause and say, it's not like a parable. When Jesus tells the parable, it'll say Jesus spoke this parable and said, or Jesus taught them in parables. So it's a little embedded fictional story that Jesus is telling. It's tagged like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not against that. Of course, Jesus tells parables, no problem. What I'm disagreeing with is the idea that the gospel authors invisibly slip these in there without giving any warning to the reader. So if you're just reading, or if you were hearing, a lot of times it was read aloud, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't be able to see and tell what was factual and what was not. And then the fourth part of the claim is the people making this claim, such as Dr. Licona or Dr. Bill Craig believes in some of these. They'll say, but it was allowed. It was allowed at the time, even though the audience couldn't tell where it was changed or where it wasn't. If they had been told, they wouldn't have minded. So an analogy Dr. Licona himself has used is a movie based on true events. If you go to see, I don't know, I use Chariots of Fire as kind of an outdated example, Black Hawk Down or whatever. There are these, and then there's the one about Flight 93. There are these movies, and they're based on real events that really happened, but parts of them have been changed. And you just watch the movie, you're not going to automatically know which part's been changed and which hasn't. You're going to have to go look that up somewhere else. And so that would be an analogy, but we don't get upset with the makers of the movie. But at the same time, and this is important, we don't consider those movies to be reliable sources about what happened. If you really wanted to research the events of 9/11 and Flight 93, and say you were a student and you are writing an essay in college in a history class on that, I don't think your teacher would be too pleased if you referenced a partially changed movie and said, well, this is what happened. Go watch this movie. No, you need to go to more sober historical sources. And the problem is the Gospels are supposed to be our sober historical sources. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, if these theories were correct, it would undermine gospel reliability. And I don't think that the people putting them forward realize that. They don't acknowledge that. So that's a point I've tried to make. And then I've said, but fortunately, the theory's false. They didn't use these fictionalizing literary devices. And I take a lot of time in The Mirror or the Mask to answer the arguments that have been made that they did and that these existed and they were accepted and the gospel authors used them, so that my readers can have confidence that that theory has been thoroughly responded to.
So you and I have talked about an example that you agree would be okay if it was just that. Let me go ahead and give you kind of my rudimentary example that I had shared with you privately and previously. So if someone were to say today, my baseball team slaughtered their opponents. I'm a Cardinals fan. Let's say, hey, they slaughtered the Cubs last week. Didn't happen, unfortunately, but let's say I said that. You and I both would know that that word slaughter does not mean they killed the Cubs. We would know, because of our use of the English language, that they beat the Cubs in a sporting game and nobody lost their life in the incident. So you're okay with wording like that being in the biblical documents. But what you're saying is this is very different than that. This isn't that kind of wording. This is an entirely different kind of thing that's going on.
Right. That, what you just used there is what we call a figure of speech, right? I mean, I have an English PhD. This is no problem. Because when you're a knowledgeable person in the language, that like an idiom or a figure of speech, you will know. And in a sense, that is like tagged. The word slaughtered is something we know. Okay. But to move the temple cleansing and then to say that this happened at the first Passover of Jesus' ministry, when John knows full well, like, suppose he did it only at the end, that's not a figure of speech. It's like narrating a whole event and saying it happened at a time when it didn't happen. And then the readers or the hearers, they're not going to know. I mean, for all John knows, they're going to figure, like I do, that it happened twice. And then according to the theory, it didn't happen twice. And he just made it happen early and, moved it over there. So it's not what you just said exactly. It's not a figure of speech like that. That's just in the language. Or like in the Psalms, it says, bow down your ear to me, O God, and hear me. It's not like the psalmist really thought that God the Father, well, he didn't believe in the Trinity, but that God had an ear. It's a personification or anthropomorphism. That's not anything that I'm opposed to, and that's not what the compositional devices are that are the unique contribution. You see, these scholars, such as Dr. Licona, they're saying that they're bringing something new. Interpreters of the Bible have always known about the Cubs slaughtered, someone, or bow down your ear, anthropomorphism. That isn't new. So if they're bringing something new, it can't be that. It's got to be something else, because it's, Dr. Licona's book was only published in 2017. So what were we learning new from it in 2017? Well, it was supposedly these compositional devices that I was just talking about, where the authors putting something in there that looks like it really happened that way, but the author himself supposedly knows that it didn't. And I think that would really undermine the reliability of the Gospels. And of course, we have to follow the evidence, but I believe that the evidence does not support that, which is good, because then we can be that much more confident in the reliability of the Gospels.
Hey, thanks so much. Dr. Licona is a friend. He's somebody I've interviewed many times, and I've interviewed him on his book on this topic on the radio show, not on YouTube yet. But again, I'm really thankful for the back and forth, and I'm thankful for this process of scholarship helping the guy on the sidelines like me have sharper answers for the critic. So thank you for your contribution to this field.